Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. For those that are new to this channel, my name is Fola and I've started this channel just to talk about international students and everything that has to do with studying in the UK. I personally started as an international student years ago and now I am lecturing in the UK, and I just thought why not share one or two things that might help anyone out there that's thinking about coming to the UK or that is already in the UK. Okay, so let's get into it. If you remember, we've been doing a series on PhD, and I want to cover everything that has to do with PhD. From my experience, this is not holy grail of everything, but what I know and how that might help you. I want to talk about fee because I had a video around fee and the type of funding on PhD available for PhD, and someone sort of like mentioned maybe I should delve a bit more into implication of funding, especially the self-funded option. Now, in my previous video, remember I did mention that there are different types of self-funding. You could have self-funding that is coming from your pocket, between you and your family sponsoring it, or you could have self-funding that is coming from an organization that you have gotten the funding, maybe from government of your country or the employer that you're working for. Now, in terms of fee, let me delve a little bit in as much as possible into PhD fee, and then we talk about implication of self-funding, especially when it comes from your pocket between you and your family, as it may be. Now, for the fee, what for your PhD, on a average, we're talking the fee for PhD is in most universities is very similar to the fee for their master's program. So where the master's program is on an average, say £14,000, you would have your PhD to be around £14,000. Now, the difference is that £14,000 for PhD will be per year. So that means we're talking of 14 times 14 and times 14. That's about 3 times, which was 3 years of such payments. Now, on average, there are some PhD programs that go all the way to 4 years. So but most self-funding would usually be around 3 years, except if you have to extend into the 4th year. Now, with the £14,000, for those that are doing laboratory type of research, you would have bench fee in addition to the £14,000. So that might be roughly around £5,000 per year for your bench fee. So that's also added to the cost. Now, you might discount, especially if you're doing your PhD in the university that you've just completed in, and that's what I would advise. If you're going to be self-funding between you and your family, try and stay in the university that, if possible, obviously, stay in the university that you finish at, because then you will get the alumni discount, which can be quite helpful for payment and the rest of that. And obviously you already know the university, you know the staff and the supervisory team and all, so it does help with for a smoother transition. But if you have to leave and go to another university, and that's also fine. But anyway, so that's what you pay for every year of a PhD program. Now, that's a lot of money, and it's also something that you have to think about really carefully before you make such decision and such step. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about how you get such money, because I wouldn't know. I mean, everyone have different circumstances, so how they get such amount is going to be dependent on their situation. But what I just want to talk about is that the implication of when you're working, when you're doing your PhD and your self-funding. The implication of it, one of it is that I've mentioned it previously, that you will have more flexibility and more direction in how you want your research to go, and how your supervisory team is going to work with you, rather than maybe demanding something from you. Of course, there has to be bare minimum, which is it has to be PhD worthy, but you also have a bit more flexibility in terms of, this is where I think this research needs to go, and this is not where. As against to when especially if the supervisory teams are the one funding the PhD because they got a grant from somewhere, they would have more say and almost like demand you do some things that you might not necessarily need for your PhD, but they want you to do it because they are funding it, right? So when it comes to payment plan, the fees it's basically the same with master's program, so how the university would expect that you pay the way you expect a master's student to pay, but the difference is, like I said, you will have to pay for 3 years as against to 1 year of a master's program. So the payment plan would be, you have a deposit, and then you have a in-between payment, and then you have they split it. You can negotiate maybe a bit more now with the finance team, where either you ask that you get payment, if they allow, obviously depending on the policy of the university, where you can have a monthly payment, or you can have maybe 3 months installmental, or the rest of that to pay. Obviously, the structure of PhD is a bit different from masters, and that's something that would be an implication when you're thinking about cost. The thing is, with PhD, you do not, unfortunately, have the school is on holiday type of scenario in masters, where you can work more than 20 hours. For PhD, is most universities, not all, but most universities, they treat you like a staff, and so that means you're expected to be on your PhD throughout, all the way until when you have your supposedly annual leave. So you are only given annual leave of about 30 days per year, depending on the university, but most universities, that's how you're expected to. So really working and making that transition between work and your program can be a bit challenging. Although with PhD, because it's a bit more independent, like hands off type of thing, you most likely would not be expected to sign some form of attendance like you would for a master's program. And so thinking about the funding would be something that is very, very critical, and you have to really delve into before you go taking up that application form. Now, I'm not going to, there are other things that I think that I'm not going to go beyond this. I know several students that have I even have a student personally that is working, and she's an international student. My PhD student she's toggling both sides, but I'm not going to delve into how all of that is done, because I shouldn't really. But I just want to say that some people are able to manage funding from home, from anywhere, and carry out their PhD program. While you're paying for 3 years, if you, for whatever reason, have to go beyond 3 years, and that happens a lot to almost everyone, PhD is such a journey. So where you have to go beyond 3 years, you would actually you will not pay the £14,000 ish, that you normally pay for the first 3 years. You would be given a fee of, they call it writing of fee. So in that writing of fee, because for that 4th year, they are expecting that you will not really need so much resources from the university, just a bench, like what I have here, decks and computer for you to work with. So you would only be paying about, depending on the university, you'll be paying about £600, which is quite minimal compared to the £14,000. Now, after that, for £600, depending, 600 to 800, it might be different for different universities. Then you would, if you exhaust that year, then you would have to so that means you finish the 4th year and you're still writing, you're still on your PhD, then you would have to go on to the 5th year. The 5th year, unfortunately, you go back to the £14,000 ish that you're paying for the first 3 years. So most students try not to exceed that 4 years, the 4th year, and you have to wrap it up and send it in. Now, after that 5th year, unfortunately, if you're still on it after the 5th year, the PhD is going to be recommended for withdrawal. So that means they feel you cannot finish the PhD and the research is probably no longer relevant, and so they would recommend that you stop your program, and that's the end of it. You would be it depends on whatever the circumstances. You might be recommended for an MPhil rather than a PhD, which MPhil is like master in philosophy, rather than a PhD, and that will be the end of that journey. I'm going to wrap this up here, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.